Hello, this is Tony Blazer for the Motocross Vault presented by Blinzall. If you're in the market for some high-quality racing oil for your two-stroke or four, make sure you go to blinzall.com and use our discount code VAULT20 to save 20% at checkout. Thank you for all the support.
Hi, this is Jim Holly, and welcome to the Motocross Vault.
Hello and welcome back to the Motocross Vault. My name is Tony Blazer, and what this video is going to cover is a look back at one of Kawasaki's most successful machines in the 1980s, the 1984 KX80. Now, Kawasaki today, of course, is a powerhouse. They have guys like Eli Tomac, Adam Cianciarulo on their team. They are a contender year in and year out for world, national, and motocross titles. But in the early 80s, they were still kind of struggling to find their foothold in things. In the 70s, they'd had some pretty high-profile riders with Jimmy Weiner, Brad Lackey on the machines, but they had not really been able to kind of crack the code for having to be as successful in terms of the grassroots level as like Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki. Kawasaki's were produced in very limited numbers, so a lot of dealerships didn't even carry the motocross models. Some years, even if you wanted them, you couldn't get them. It was kind of they were much more interested in selling street bikes in the 70s, but as the 80s began, Kawasaki started really putting a little more effort into motocross. They came out with the new Unitrack in 1980. They were one of the first manufacturers to put disc brakes on their bikes. They were really kind of trying to push the envelope, and they started spreading out a little bit more with a more diverse product lineup. And this KX80 was one of the models they added in. I believe 1980 was the first year for the KX80. And this bike was a legitimate race bike. You know, in the 70s, again, yeah, the YZ80 had the RM80. Honda's entry was the XR75, which gives you kind of an idea of how the manufacturer saw the 80 class, at least initially. There wasn't really a whole lot of performance there, but in the 80s, the 80 class really started to become one of the premier divisions in terms of development. They were getting all new bikes every year, maybe two, unlike today where an 80 might go a decade or more without any major updates. You were having new revisions in some cases every year, and the bikes were getting quickly much more a scaled down version of the bigger machines in terms of performance. And this KX80 really was Kawasaki's entry into kind of getting mainstream success. Again, the 125 and the 250 and the 420 particularly were not great bikes. And this 80 really started to convert people over to thinking Kawasaki was a real contender. The 80s were the first ones really to be class leaders. And then eventually the 125s in like 1984. And then later the 250s and 500s kind of took hold, but the 80 was really the one that got them going in the early 80s. And in 1983, they came out with an all-new KX80, really advanced machine for its time, great little mini-class racer, and this 84 bike, very good machine as well. So what this review is going to look back, a little bit of what they changed in 83 and 84. Wasn't a giant difference between these 2 years, but it's still a great machine. And again, probably the best machine Kawasaki made in 1983 was their 80. And then at 84, the 125 and the 80 were easily better than the 250 and the 500. So really well-regarded machines at the time. And these little bikes are cool even today. The 60, when they came out with it, it's about the same era. You know, it basically kept going and was the 60 to have all those years. So the Kawasaki really was getting it right in the small bikes at this time. So this video is going to cover that. If you'd like to check out some other videos I've done reviews of many other Kawasaki machines, but I've covered ATVs, motocross bikes, all kinds of stuff on the channel, from ATVs to motocross to off-road machines. Hopefully you can find something that might interest you. If you'd like to support what I do here, I have a Patreon page I just launched. I'm trying to figure out what is the best thing to do as far as rewards and stuff, and if you're interested in supporting the channel, you can reach out there. I'll put a link in the description below. I'd love to know what kind of rewards people would be interested in looking at. I also have Motocross Vault merch available. You can find the link to that as well in our description. I have all kinds of designs for Kawasaki, Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha, even Husqvarna. Got all kinds of stuff there, bikes, bike, truck, and all kinds of different combinations. And I'd love to do something. If you have something in mind you'd like me to do special for you, I've done a few commissioned ones as well. So just let me know if you'd like a cool t-shirt with your bike and number on it. Hit me up and I can see what I can do there as well. So here, without further ado, is a look back at the 1984 Kawasaki KX80. Throughout the first 2 decades of Japan's involvement in motocross, Kawasaki was little more than a curiosity to most American riders. Despite being one of the first Japanese brands to produce a machine specifically designed for motocross, their early racing endeavors proved far less successful than their rivals. Kawasaki's early motocross models were largely lackluster performers that failed to gain traction in the marketplace. In the later 70s, Kawasaki finally started to get serious about motocross with the introduction of the all-new 78 KX125A4 and KX250A4. The A4 models proved that Team Green could compete if they put up the same level of effort that they were showing to their successful line of street machines. While the 78 and 79 KX models showed Kawasaki was capable of competing with their rivals, the limited availability of the A4 and A5 models, combined with a street-focused dealer network, continued to hinder their efforts to gain traction in the motocross market. In 1980, Kawasaki introduced their first Mini designed specifically for the motocross market, the all-new KX80. While not world beaters, the introduction of the KX80 and its bigger brother, the KX420, signaled that Kawasaki was getting far more serious about the motocross market. While the larger KX models continued to struggle to make a dent in the market share of their rivals, the new green Minis began to lure parents away from the yellow and red machines. Strong motors with broad power bands and advanced technology highlighted the KX Minis of the early 80s. These fast and easy-to-ride motors made the KX80s an attractive choice for both novice and experienced riders alike. An all-new machine in 1983 brought liquid cooling, long travel suspension, and the slickest styling in the KX lineup. With its Sano looks, state-of-the-art chassis, and powerful motor, the KX80 dominated mini-class racing in 1983. For 1984, Kawasaki looked to capitalize on its success by refining the winning 83 package. Cosmetically, the 84 KX80 looked very similar to the 83 model, with the only major visual cues being a switch from black to blue for the seat and an all-new disc brake at the front. This disc was very big news in 1984, with many full-size machines and all of the KX's 80cc competitors still using drums front and rear. This additional stopping power gave the KX80 a distinct advantage going into turns that was hard to overcome. All the bodywork was a carryover from 83, but most riders liked the styling and feel of the KX the year before, and it remained one of the most attractive machines in the class. Some smaller riders had an issue with the slightly larger feel, but this allowed the KX to suit a wider range of ages without feeling too cramped. On the chassis front, the KX80 remained largely unchanged from 1983. It retained the same steel frame and dog-bone style unitrack suspension it had used the year before. While painted to look like aluminum, the swing arm remained manufactured out of steel. Travel in the rear was set at 10 inches, and the Kawasaki shock offered adjustments for spring preload and rebound damping. Up front, the 84 KX employed an all-new set of 33mm Kawasaki air-adjustable forks that were slightly larger in diameter and said to offer a more progressive stroke and less stiction than the year before. As with the shock, the forks offered 10 inches of travel, but they did lack the external adjustments of the rear. In 1983, the real strength of the KX80 had been its class-leading motor. The KX's chassis and suspension performance were mid-pack, but its motor was omnipotent. In a class where narrow and peaky power was the status quo, the KX's broad and strong power band was all but unbeatable. For 1984, Kawasaki was careful not to mess with success by focusing on minor refinements to their liquid-cooled powerhouse. Internally, the motor retained the same bore and stroke and 82 cc's of displacement as 1983. New porting was added to boost low-end power, and an all-new 29mm oval slide McCuney carburetor simplified jetting by ditching the proprietary reverse flow jets used in 83. Refinements to the reed valve and airbox also looked to further broaden power by improving airflow into the tiny motor. Finishing off the motor changes for 84 was an all-new alloy silencer that saved several ounces over the steel unit of 83. On the track, the 84 KX80 was once again the class of the field in the motor department. Its 82cc mill pumped out the strongest low-end and mid-range power and pulled the farthest overall. It positively rocketed out of corners and left the other machines in its dust. On top end, it lost out to the high RPM shriek of the RM80, but by then the KX was long gone. It was both incredibly fast and easy to ride. It offered superior low-end torque for all the newbies and a brawny mid-range burst for the fast guys. Many experts might have wanted a bit more pull on top, but for 99% of the Mini pilots in 84, the KX's motor was a winner. Past the motor sweepstakes, the competition got much tougher in 1984. As delivered from the factory, both the fork and shock settings were very soft on the KX. Considering the Kawasaki was both the largest and fastest Mini in the class, this seemed like a strange choice for a machine aimed at a more experienced and older demographic. Both ends bottomed severely if pushed, and the fork stove appreciably when the powerful front disc was applied. The shock was also slightly quick on the rebound and prone to kicking in the whoops. Smaller kids probably appreciated the soft, stock suspension settings, as it allowed the larger KX to settle more and get their boots on the ground, but fast kids were surely going to need stiffer springs and some oil fiddling to get the suspension up to snuff. On the handling front, the KX was once again a middling performer. With its soft, stock suspension, the front end dove in corners and tended to wash out the front wheel on slick turns. Under power, the rear squatted, and the front wheel danced skyward as the powerful motor launched the KX forward. At speed, the KX was not prone to head shake, but its lackluster suspension gave the machine an unsettled feel. All three of its competitors ranked higher in the suspension categories, but if you got the suspension sorted, the KX became much more livable. On the detailing front, the 84 KX80 was considered good for its time. The bodywork looked great, and older riders loved its roomy ergonomics. The blue safety seat made sliding forward in the turns easy, and dads appreciated the convenient handholds and grab handles built into the bodywork. About the only complaint riders had was the stock bars, which Motocross magazine compared to a pair of bull's horns. They were too tall and wide, and nearly everyone hated their bend. The stock front disc worked flawlessly once broken in, but took several rides to burn off the anti-corrosion coating Kawasaki installed at the factory. This left several testers questioning the brake's performance initially before the coating finally wore off. Some bikes also suffered from an annoying air leak that caused the KX to pop on top end. This was a well-known Kawasaki issue at the time, and hunting down these air leaks was part of the KX experience. Aside from these small quibbles and the marshmallow stock suspension, the KX was a very competitive machine. In 1984, Kawasaki completed a 3-year run of mini dominance by once again offering a monster motor housed in a rather pedestrian chassis. If handling and suspension were your priorities, then a yellow or red machine was probably a better choice. If however you were into pulling hole shots and throwing rooster tails on your competition, then the Kawasaki was your machine. On a 250 or 500, the KX80's handling and suspension inadequacies would have been enough to torpedo its chances at victory, but in the cutthroat mini class, the Little Green Mini's motor domination was more than enough to offset its lack of handling finesse. So there you have it. That's a look back at the 1984 Kawasaki KX80, a machine that was a really great machine at its time, a bike that really kind of started to put Kawasaki on the map in terms of at least mainstream appeal. It's actually smart to get them going on the small bikes. You know, you hope that obviously the thought is they get an 80 or a 60, then they step up to the 125, and then when they're a little older, the 250 and the 500. Dad gets to know the Kawasaki. It's kind of an entry point into buying Kawasaki, and I think it certainly worked. The bikes became much, much better as the 80s went on, and Kawasaki became a legitimate contender. They were really right there with Honda through much of the 80s. You know, you had Jeff Ward and Rick Johnson going at it, and then the CRs and the KXs going at it in the showrooms as well. As Suzuki kind of took a little bit of a dive in the late 80s, Yamaha had a couple of rough patches there too. And Kawasaki really this is where they really grew their brand and started to become really successful in terms of motocross, is in this early 80s. So if you like this sort of thing, again, check out some of the other videos I've done. If you like, subscribe, and share on social media, I would very much appreciate it. Leave a comment below. Helps the algorithm. So until we meet again, this is Tony Blazer for the Motocross Vault. Keep the rubber side down. Peace.